Most people go to free events looking for investors. I do the opposite. I'm willing to pay to get in the right room to get to the people who are writing checks.
That's Alexis Morgan, founder of Peach State Capital Group. At just 22, she has raised over $45 million through events. While running her fund, Alexis pretty much lives at investor events, attending as a guest, hosting her own, or speaking with industry leaders. She has turned the event game into a predictable capital raising machine. Today, she's going to reveal her exact strategy, including how to pick events that actually have money in the room.
I tend to notice that when you get into a paid room or a paid community, people are more serious.
Her conversation strategy that makes people remember you.
Pull out my phone and say, hey, let's take a quick selfie, and I'll be able to send that via text or email to them afterwards.
The follow-up framework that turns handshakes into meetings.
The best thing that you can do to follow up with someone after the event is talk about what you discussed in person.
Alexis, so what kind of events should someone go to so that they're not wasting their time with tire kickers?
Where I see people go wrong when it comes to attending events and looking for investors is they're willing to go to everything and anything. They are basically spraying and praying in their networking, hoping to meet the right person at the right time. One thing that's worked for me is I've been extremely granular and extremely intentional about what events I'm actually attending. And so if I'm looking to raise for a multifamily deal, I'm going to go to specific commercial real estate events. If I'm looking to raise for a private equity deal, I'm going to go to specific mergers and acquisition events. Most of these events, too, are paid. I tend to notice that when you get into a paid room or a paid community, people are more serious.
So when you say intention, like everybody has same intention, it's like, okay, we're going to make money. So is there any different types of intention?
Yeah, when I'm going to events, there's three main things that I'm going for in terms of intentionality. The first one is publicity and branding. The ability to market yourself, the ability to tell people what you're up to, the ability to get your name out there. That is one really important piece. People can't do business with you if they don't know who you are. The second piece is monetization. Understanding this is probably where most people go in network. This is the intention of most people. But understanding how is this event, how is this meetup, how is this conference going to actually monetize for my company? And being very clear on that before you step foot in that door, before you step foot in that room, so that you can get granular on what was a good connection, what was an okay connection, who do I need to follow up with, who do I never need to speak to again. I think, a lot of people leave these conferences and networking events with a stack full of cards, but the reality is you're not going to do business with everyone you talk to. But the ability to say, this is who I'm looking for, this was a good connection, that's very important. So identifying what does monetization look like after leaving that event and making that clear before ever going to the event is another intention that you have to set. And then the third one would be education. I think one of the things that has been a huge blessing for me and has allowed me to achieve what I've done is I'm constantly staying in a state of curiosity. So I'll go to these events, whether it be myself shaking hands and asking good questions to other operators or other investors in the room, or I'm going to an event to educate other people on what it is that I do. Maybe I'm the industry leader in that room. But the third intention I would look at when going to these events is what can I learn or what can I share with the people that I meet in terms of education?
Yeah, that completely makes sense. So is there any metric you look for? Like if you're going for publicity, if this happens, then it was a successful event?
Yeah, I think when you're going to an event, how to tell if it's a good one or a bad one, you base it off of your intentions. Number one, publicity. Did the people that I met, do they resonate with my offering? Do they resonate with me? Is this the right room to actually promote myself and what it is that I'm doing? The second one was monetization. So after I leave an event, it's if I met 10 people, how many of those 10 people actually have the probability of becoming customers for me? If it's one or two, there probably is a better event out there. There's probably a better target audience. And maybe if there's not, I put one together and I host one. But if it's 8 or 9 out of 10 people that you met, 8 or 9 are good fits for your business, that's a great event. I'll go back there every day of the week. And then the third one that you would kind of look at if I should go back or if this was a good event is, did I learn something or did I share what it is that I had to share? I always love events where I'm getting educated, where I'm learning new things, getting introduced to terminology. For me, even if I don't have exactly my target audience in the room. If I can learn something about a new industry or a new target audience and figure out a way to incorporate my offer, then I'll go back to that event as well. So to determine if it was a good event or a bad event, I mean, most people focus on the monetization channel, which is good. But I would just take a real analysis based off the attentions that you set before you attended.
You mentioned like going back to the events like multiple times. So is this something you look for? Like you just go to a bunch of events, and if you feel like it's a good one, then you just keep going back to those events.
There are definitely operators and event hosts that host reoccurring. There's two things that I look at when I look at going back to an event, why I would ever reattend the same event. The first one is more of a relationship building style. So you see this like with masterminds, the people there are the same people over and over. And that really allows you to build these tight-knit relationships. If you're doing that with the right group, your whole life, your whole business can change. You kind of evolve and grow up together. Think of going from like being a freshman to a senior. You have the same class. That's a really powerful group to continue returning back to, especially again with the right investors, with the right team, with the right operators to mastermind and have that effect for years on end. That's very powerful. You're building relationships early on with industry leaders. And again, these relationships, that power, that influence compounds over years. So to have that opportunity, that's a great reason to go back. That's one aspect when I look at, do I go back to this event? Is the same group of people there and are they evolving? The second perspective is the host constantly bringing in new people? And if the host is constantly bringing in new people to the event or to the conference or to the group, to the community, whatever it is, then that's where publicity comes in. You have the opportunity to return to that event and constantly market yourself or your business or whatever it is that you have going on, how you can add value to people who previously didn't know your name. And so those are the two perspectives that I look at is if the host cultivates one group and that group is the same group of people and they continuously evolve, that has benefits with the right people. And if the host constantly brings in new people, new eyeballs, new members, that has a lot of weight and leverage when it comes to marketing and brand and getting people to know you in terms of publicity.
So when it comes to publicity and monetization, like why can't people just directly go for monetization? Like why they should focus? I mean, do you have a process? Like, okay, first I focus on publicity and then go for monetization, or you just go for it?
People cannot do business with you unless they know who you are, right? Monetization, we're so focused on it, but it's really the second or third step in the process of making money. People first need to know about who you are. And so if you're so focused on your product and your development and your fulfillment, you could make the most beautiful product in the world. If no one knows about it, you're cooked, right? You're screwed. No one knows that your thing exists. And so publicity, marketing is a huge, huge aspect of business that I think a lot of people fail to focus on. And if there's a business owner out there that's like, I just want to monetize, I just want to make money, then the first thing that I would tell them is you need to figure out how to let people know about your product or service, whether that be going to events, marketing online, cold messages, whatever it is. People cannot do business with you unless they know you exist.
It's almost like publicity is like getting some credibility, before you kind of like pitch them on, all the deals you have and stuff.
I'm glad you mentioned that because the first step is publicity. The second step nearly is credibility, making sure they understand that you can fulfill. And then finally, they actually are willing to invest or swipe their credit card or whatever the case may be, and you'll be able to monetize. Monetization is like the second or third, fourth step. It's not the first step of this process when it comes to business acquisitions.
So you talked about three intentions, right? It's like education, will keep it aside. So publicity and monetization. So is it like two different things or is it like a part of one thing? So for example, if it's publicity, you just, kind of like build connections with them, get their contacts, and you're just following up and you're kind of like not pitching and you don't have a kind of like sales process. You're more focused on relationship. And then monetization could be, it's kind of like publicity plus, monetization could be a whole process. Or is it just like one thing? You want them to know, like get the publicity and then sales process in the back end.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a funnel. These are marketing concepts for people to easily understand what it is that you do. What value do you provide to the marketplace? That's the first step. Now, then there's a click in someone's mind when they hear your one liner or when they hear your elevator pitch where they say, or you engage them to tell them more. They say, tell me more, I'm interested. That's the shift from when you're moving in from a marketing and publicity standpoint into more of a monetization and sales process. That is literally when the switch is flipped. And that's a very important thing to recognize as you're going out to events for sure.
You give your thought process on, like going to events, right? You could have some intention with what you're trying to do in that event. So, and also you get a lot of referrals, hey, here is another event, would you be interested in coming and things like that. I'm pretty sure you have some criteria you look at. Okay, does this match all these criteria to see if it's a event even worth going to? Do you have something like that in terms of criteria?
I definitely look at who else is going, if you can find any insights on who's going to be in attendance, that's going to be the easiest thing to do. That's going to allow you to be very strict with your time. Some events also that I've been to, the best ones, honestly, they allow you to set up in-person meetings in advance of the event. So you can not only see who's going, but actually message them and set up a time to connect with them at that event. Those are always great. But yeah, look, every event you have a different intention. And so if your intention is to build relationships and you're getting pitched a 2,500 person event, the probability of building relationships at a 2,500 person event is relatively small, especially if it's one day. But if you're getting pitched, a 100 person event or a 50 person event and it's a 2-day conference, you're going to get to know some people in that room. You're going to have time to get to know them. And there's not so much volume. There's not so many people. So I think I hate to beat a dead horse here, but it comes back to, what are you going to the event for? What is your intention? And that's where I see people go wrong. They attend anything and everything. They prostitute their time. You only have 24 hours in a day. You're trying to build a business here. You have to be very careful about who you're spending your time with, where you're spending it, and making sure you're getting to the right target audience. So I think, setting an intention around, why am I going to this? How does this event monetize for me? Is this event a publicity event for me? Or am I going here to learn something? Getting really clear on why you are going to events. And for me, for the last 2.5 years of my career, and still even now, I only want to go to events where I can meet investors, specifically investors who are passive. This means limited partners, fund managers who are co-GPs, family offices, etc. And so a lot of my time is spent going to these events where it's really like a discussion of the marketplace rather than an educational event. And in the first year of my career, I went to a ton of educational events. You sit down, you're at a desk, a row, and you take notes the whole time. There's a teacher who's teaching you the criteria. I remember one of them was Grant Cardone's. Another one was all around self-development and meditation. Those are different events. That was my intention my first year as an entrepreneur, to learn. Now, a lot of my intention is to cultivate investors, right? To get investors in my deals. And so the intention of why you're attending is going to be the most important thing.
Yeah, that completely makes sense. Everything boils down to intention. Once you have intention, everything becomes easier. So also, you're a big proponent of, going for pay for it, pay to be in the right rooms. So what's your thoughts on free events versus, going for paid events?
Yeah, my whole life changed when I started paying for education, paying for access. If you think about what's important to wealthy people, one of the most important things that I've found is their time, right? It's not necessarily that they need or want to make more money. They don't want their time wasted. And when you go to a free event, people are paying with their time. That's the most abundant resource that they have. They don't necessarily have capital to invest to filter quality. And so when I started paying for events, one of the first events that I went to was $399 for a 2-day weekend. Very easy. Then it started going up. It was $2,500 for a ticket, $1,100 for a ticket. And now I've even spent $5,000 to $10,000 for 2 or 3 day masterminds, because the more and more that I've paid to get in the right room, the better the room is, because the capital that's able to afford that, those people are willing to, shortcut any time wasters, any people who are not serious, anything that is going to waste their time and energy. That investment, that ticket price is the filter. And so I've found that once you pay to get in the room is such a higher quality of individuals. The room is more serious, more sophisticated, more ready and willing to do deals with other people in the room. So I wouldn't say that free events are bad. They're certainly not bad. Just know that when you go there, because it costs so little, because it costs nothing but time, you're going to get people who don't mind wasting time. And so then you, as the attendee, have to be very careful yourself about getting your time wasted, right? You have to be very intentional about, why am I going to this free event? What is here for me? And sometimes it's publicity. Sometimes you're there to recruit people. Sometimes you're there to share with people what they can learn about getting into a paid event. But again, like, just going to a free event, just being very aware of the audience that may be there, people who are not quite ready to pay, 15, 20, 30 grand.
I mean, right now you're at a stage where a lot of people know who you are. So, I mean, they might be sending, hey, here is another mastermind. Here is this mastermind. So for people, who might be getting started with their events journey, okay, they want to go to the events and masterminds and stuff. How do you go about like finding the best ones? Because I'm pretty sure there are like, masterminds and stuff, which is going to cost a lot. At the same time, they are complete shit. Is there any process you look at, like, okay, this is how I go about, let's say finding events other than the inbound once you're getting?
Yeah, I've probably hosted over 100 events at this point, and I've attended probably the same amount. I've tended to host a lot more the last year or two. And you have a great question: how to find the best ones. I think the thing that's been the most beneficial for me when attending is asking for referrals. Like, I don't typically, in the beginning, when I was just starting, I would just research. I remember the first event that I ever went to, first like investing event I ever went to, I found it online by Googling Orlando real estate meetup. And then I went. But as I've evolved, I tend to go to events that my friends are going to, because I have, a group of friends that are a great group of influence, right? And I met them through going to the free things. And sometimes at a lot of the free ones, there's some sort of upsell to join in a paid community. And that's where you can ask the host or ask other people in the room, do you know anyone who's in it? And I just ask people who are in it, what are your thoughts? Is it worth it? Do you feel like it was money well spent? Would you recommend that I get into it? That's how I've gotten into a lot of paid communities. It's just by asking the people who already hang around that ecosystem, how's your experience? And if they give me good feedback, I'm willing to join, But nothing's foolproof, right? I've joined stuff too that I feel like I've wasted money on, but it's not wasted. That's a bad perspective. You have to think of it as an ignorance tax, right? You had to figure out what was inside the room to know. You don't want to ever say what if, like I wish I would have. And so when I think about the money that I've spent on communities or events or educational programs that didn't necessarily turn out the way that I wanted it to turn out, I just think of it as an ignorance tax. Like, I didn't know. And so that was the tax that I had to pay for trying to find out.
I mean, I don't know about the events because I haven't been to a lot. But when it comes to, I spend a lot on courses, coaching programs and stuff. I mean, till now, I think I haven't found a program or course where I felt like, okay, I didn't learn anything. Because there was this one course. It was about, like I was just buying everything possible on podcasting and stuff. So one of the course I bought was regarding this. It's like most of it, like 99% of it was like useless. It's like, it was like pretty much generic.
That 1%.
But that there was this one thing that was more of like a research. They use a like specific Boolean, search on Google to kind of like bring up a certain things. So that one thing was pretty good because I implemented that, and they even implemented for one of my friend, his podcast. The guests were impressed, on that particular thing. So I was like, first I was like, shit, I lost money, it was not worth it. But then that one thing I was like, yeah, I would pay for that, to kind of like get that one specific thing. So I think I'm pretty sure that's the same thing with the events as well.
It's the same thing, right? It's like it's never a waste. There's always something to learn, and that comes back to mindset, right? It's all about the perspective that you have. That's it.
100%. So now we know like how to find events and like having that intention. So the next step is preparing for the event, right? So before you go into the event, do you do any kind of research, like hosts, guests or something like that? Like what do you like any kind of preparation you do?
I actually do a 4-hour meditation and a 3-hour journaling set. No, I'm just joking.
I was shocked for a moment. I
Oh.
was like, I didn't know that.
No, I mean, look, if you bought a ticket, you should have done your research already. The day before the event, I typically just reiterate to myself like why I'm going, what's the purpose, making sure that I'm clear. And then for me, like on the day of the event, I just try to keep my energy high because you're going to be meeting a lot of people. You're going to be having a ton of conversations. You will be pitching your when you go to these events, it's like speed dating. You're saying the same things over and over and over again most of the time. You're meeting someone for the first time, and so they need to hear your one liner. They need to hear your elevator pitch. They need to hear what it is that you do. They want to hear your story. So that can get very exhausting. I try to keep my energy very high, have a good breakfast, and other than that, you just rock and roll. You roll with the punches, and you move through the event. You take notes if it's something that's educational. One thing that has helped me, though, I picked this up from a colleague of mine. Whenever I collect a business card, I will typically write notes on that business card on what it is that I saw in that like relationship. Because you're meeting so many people, sometimes when you get home and you have a stack of cards, it's like I don't even remember who this person was. So I'll like pull out a pen and I'll write on the business card what it is that made me curious about them, or what it is that we can do together, what we discussed in a way, so that when I get home, if I'm following up for monetization, right, for any sort of collaboration, I'm clear on what we talked about. I don't forget. And then something else that I've done is I've taken photos. So if I'm saving someone's contact in my phone, as I'm doing that, I'll pull out my phone and say, hey, let's take a quick selfie. We take a picture and I'll be able to send that via text or email to them afterwards. So they have a face, a face to the name, and they remember who it is that they met.
I mean, the photo one is pretty good. So, like, do you do any research on the people that are coming in the sense, so that you could be ready that, okay, when I go to this room, I go and meet this people first, and then I kind of, take care of the rest later.
Yeah, for sure. I think sometimes it's if there's like speakers, for sure. If there's someone I want to meet, I'm going to research and make sure I understand their story and ask intelligent questions. But I think the truth of the matter is like sometimes you don't know who it is that's going to be there. So I try to, be really curious. One of my favorite books, How to Win Friends and Influence People, talks about the fact that people like to talk about themselves. And so if there's someone that I'm intrigued by, someone that I want to meet, that I recognize I want to meet at the event, I will network with them in a way that's just asking them about their story, asking them how they achieve what they've achieved. I'll be very curious about who they are, because you don't always know who you're going to meet. I think that's sort of the special thing about some of these events. You are open minded to what can happen. It's sort of serendipitous in a way when you go to a lot of these networking events. You don't know who your next investor is going to be. You don't know who your next partner is going to be. Your next deal might come from someone in the room. But you get that. You get the answers to those questions by being curious and asking about the other person and what they do.
So people talk about, oh, you have to dress this way if you're going to these events. You have to be like, first impression. Like, what's your take on that?
Look, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's true. It's true. You have to, especially at some of the higher level events, there's definitely a first impression. Like you need to make sure that you can dress however you want, but I think being aware of how you're going to be perceived based on how you dress is an important factor. And so if you want to be perceived as prestigious and sophisticated and wealthy, then you should make sure that your appearance looks that way. If you want to be perceived as casual, approachable, chill, then your appearance should reflect that as well. You can dress however you'd like to dress. I'm never going to tell anyone to change who they are or change what they wear. That's not it. What I will say though is having an awareness of how the way that you present yourself makes you perceived. Like you just need to be aware of what other people are thinking. Now, whether or not you care what other people are thinking, totally up to you. Totally up to you. No one should be in control of what you decide to do with your life, and what you decide to do with your clothes, how you present yourself. But I do think having an awareness and being okay with that awareness is probably a good idea.
Yeah, I think one realization I had with this, when it comes to dressing and stuff, was, I mean, a few years back, I was like, okay, Harmozy wears, tank tops and shorts. I mean, we got to keep it simple, less decisions. And I was trying to follow that for a few months. Then I realized, okay, Harmozy can do it because he makes 100 million a year.
Exactly.
I mean,
Exactly.
people compare Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates. Oh, they wear the same thing. I'm like, it's Mark Zuckerberg. You know what I mean? Like, doesn't matter what he wears. So either get a good track record, and then you could wear whatever you want.
Exactly.
In the beginning, you gotta,
Exactly. You can wear whatever you want after you've achieved all the success and people want to network with you. But until then, you need to make sure your perception is matching the intention that if you want to do deals, dress the part of someone who does deals, right? You need to embody the person that you want to be.
sense. So when it comes to, like executing what we discussed, publicity, monetization, and things like that, I mean, there are pretty much like two ways to go about it. One is gonna be like one-to-one, and another one could be one-to-many. So one-to-many, I mean, it's about, there are kind of like two ways. Like one, you could be the speaker in the other people's event, and another one is going to be hosting. So we'll keep the hosting for a later part. So let's say we're going to other people's event, and the two options. One is you go as an attendee, and you kind of have one-to-one conversations, and then you kind of go in as a speaker. We are doing one-to-many, right? So most of the people, of course, who are watching this would be kind of like doing the one-to-one. But still, for the little bit of people, who are like are at a stage where they could do one-to-many or getting like speaking gigs. So I would love to cover that first, and go for and then go to the one-to-one later. I mean, you have done a lot of speaking, of course, other than the ones you host. Like, how do you get these opportunities right now?
Yeah, I think the ability it's funny. It's not like anybody reaches out to me necessarily. Of course, sometimes people reach out to me and they're like, "Hey, will you speak at my event? Will you come to my conference?" Yes, that does happen, but in the beginning, and even still to this day, it's a lot of creation, right? It's a lot of kind of putting it together myself. I remember I just did this past summer 13 city tour. I did up the West Coast and then up the East Coast. And that was just an idea. And I was like, this is a great idea. I messaged a couple people who might be able to help me host it. And then we started gathering attendees. As the host, you can create these events. But as someone who's speaking on someone else's stage, I think that comes from your relationships, and that comes from the credibility that you have online, for example. One of the things that I'm a big advocate of is if people can watch, a 30-minute, hour-long video of you speaking online, they might be inspired to ask you to then speak on their stage. But if no one knows who you are, if no one can discover you, right? If you don't have any publicity going, then you're going to have a tough time getting speaking engagements, because that host isn't going to see any value. They're not going to see any evidence of what you've done thus far. So it comes down to relationships in a way, knowing who's hosting what, and messaging them and doing outreach. And, you can do that by researching what events are going on, looking at who are the hosts of those events and shooting them a quick email or a cold message. But also, in support of that, in that cold message or in that cold email, having some of your already done speaking engagements, whether it just be you on YouTube or you at another event, having sort of like a highlight reel in a way of what you've spoken about, what your expertise is. That's definitely helpful when it comes to getting on other people's stages.
Because you have hosted a lot of events, and you have probably reached out to other people to kind of like come and speak as a kind of like a speaker. So like, what do they look for in a speaker, whoever they're looking to kind of like bring them on their events?
I can't speak for everyone, but I can tell you what I look for if I'm going to have someone speak on a stage that I'm hosting. The first thing that I'll look for is their expertise. So, do they have expertise that I don't have? Can they provide something to my audience that I just, quite literally could not provide? Do they have a different perspective that's interesting? Their experience, expertise, perspective is the first thing that I look for. Is there some variation between them and me? Because if they're just the exact same person, they run the same business, they have very similar perspective on the business, there's not a lot of value there to be added to the audience. The reason people come and attend is to get exposure. And so if I'm bringing someone on who's exactly like me, they're not getting exposed to a lot more information. That's the first thing. The second thing that I'll look for is their audience, right? Can this person pull in eyeballs or a different audience to the event that I'm hosting, to the event that's going on? You see this happen every single time that there's an event. You have the main headliners, and those main headliners have a huge audience. They might not be there because they're providing a different perspective. They're there because they can provide more marketing, more attendees, a different audience to be drawn to a reason to come to the event. I'd say that's the second thing that I look at when I'm considering bringing in another speaker.
Yeah, I think in the beginning, even if you don't have a crazy audience, but if you have a lot of value to add, I think you could still kind of like make it work. And then, kind of like build up the audience side of it.
So that's the first part, right? Value. Do you have value in terms of your perspective, your experience, your expertise? That's a huge part of it, and that's actually my primary reasoning for bringing in a speaker. The secondary one, like a cherry on top bonus, is if they have a different audience than me that can learn and be drawn to the event.
So when it comes to like you presenting as a speaker, like what's your goal with your presentation?
It's different every time. It's different every time. Sometimes you're there to make a story and have people resonate with you. It really depends on the topic of the event. I've done speeches where my goal is to move them through a sales process and get people to sign up for something. I've done speaking engagements where the goal is to tell my story and share, lessons I've learned. I've done speaking engagements where I want people to identify with me and befriend me and build relationships with people. It's different every time, and I think you need to craft your story and craft your speech based on your intention, based on what you're trying to accomplish at that event. I see a lot of speakers go to events with the same keynote, and that's great to master that keynote. But I think you do something really special when you craft something really unique for that particular audience. And so the truthful answer is that it's different every time, depending on what is the host trying to accomplish. This comes back to the thing that we talked about in the beginning. If I'm going on someone else's stage, if I'm going to someone else's event, and I know the host, I'm always going to ask them, what do you want to come out of this event? And I'm going to craft what I present to push that agenda. That's how you get invited back. That's how you get respect. That's how you build relationships with the leadership teams. It's one thing to deliver for the audience, but if you're going to a friend's event or someone's invited you to their stage, you want to maintain a positive relationship with them.
Real quick, guys, each of these episodes represents over 30 hours of my personal work, not including my post-production team's time. I'm building this podcast to become the number one resource for business acquisitions, and the only way that's going to happen is through your feedback. So please drop a comment with a timestamp for the parts that you found valuable or not helpful. If you're on audio platforms, you can leave a review. This will help me understand like what you like, what you don't like, so I can create exactly the content you want to see. Thanks for your support. Now back to the podcast. One of the question I kind of ask in the pre-interview, and almost like most of the guests say it's a great question, is like, I mean, I think you might have said it as well. I don't remember, but it's like, what's a win for you? You coming to the podcast. They are like, okay, that's a great question. And then they literally tell me like what they're trying to, like get like what outcome they're looking for out of this podcast. So based on that, I could, kind of like deliver of what they are looking for. So just to put it in a different way, it's like, what do you want the audience to like, feel after you end your presentation that you feel like that was a good presentation?
Such a good question. I mean, when I leave stages, when I leave Zoom meetings, webinars, whatever it is, wherever I'm speaking, the things that I want people to feel for me is authenticity. I want people to know that whatever they just saw was real. I think people can detect BS. I think there's a lot of BS in the world of speaking and marketing and engagements. And I want people to know that what I'm sharing with them is from my own experience or my own knowledge, and it's authentic and it's real. And that's one of the main things, no matter what I'm talking about: emotions, friendship, business, investments, whatever it is that I'm talking about. One of the core values that I think is consistent is I want people to feel authenticity, oozing out of whatever it is that I'm speaking about. The second thing would just be the credibility and the expertise, the experience, and that comes from the first part, it being real, right? People won't feel credibility, people won't feel expertise, people won't feel experience if it feels fake. So those are the two things that I would say are consistent no matter what I'm speaking about. That's what I want people to feel. The things that change, sometimes I want people to feel warm and fuzzy. Sometimes I want people to feel like, holy shit, we got to do something. Like those things change depending on what I'm talking about. But the consistent ones is for sure authenticity.
So let's get to the one-on-one, right? So let's assume you went to an event right now. You entered the doors. Walk me kind of like a map. Where do you sit? Who do you meet? Is it like the people you know, or people like a new people?
Well, if I'm going to an event for the first time, if I know people there, obviously I'll say hi. But more or less, I am focused on meeting new people if I've never been to that event before, and understanding the type of people that are in the room as well. I'm shaking hands, I'm making eye contact with people, shaking hands, introducing myself, and asking them, what do you do? One of my favorite opening questions actually is, how did you hear about this event? Because if they got invited, if they found out about it online, if they've been attending for 10 years, that's helpful information for me to know, right? How did you hear about this event is one of my first opening questions. And maybe we know someone similar. Like, it's just a great open-ended that's different than, what do you do, right? Another question that I ask is, what are you excited about right now? What projects are coming up for you and your team? And what is their business model? Is there any value that I can add to their business model? Whether they're full-time investors, whether they're operators, whether they're service providers, whether they're freaking plumbers, I don't know. Those are general questions that get people talking. And the main thing that I'm looking to do when I'm meeting new people at these events is get them talking, collect data, understand where they are, who they are, what they do, without necessarily asking what it is that you do. What do you do? Like, it's such an overrated question. What do you do?
Let's say you found a person, you want to go and talk to him, but how do you go and introduce yourself? Like, is there any specific line you have, and like, hey, this is what I do, and before you ask the question?
I love these questions. There's no secret, really. There's no secret. It's, hi, my name is Alexis Morgan. How did you hear about the event? That's it. There's nothing special that I'm saying to get people to write $2 million checks. I'll tell you that. There's no shortcuts. There's no secrets. There's no special sauce. I think the most wealthy and successful people that I know, they do the boring things really well, and they do them over and over and over again.
Yeah. I was thinking of a unique line, but it's just straightforward. So makes sense. So, of course, when you're talking to them, like, your goal is probably like know more about them, right? So are you, like, when you're having those conversations, are you trying to, like, kind of like let them know about the opportunities you have, or you're just, trying to like get as much information as possible? Or what does it look like?
I'm not going to present what it is, like, especially an investment opportunity, the first time I meet someone. I'm just not. It's not my style. Unless it's like they have specifically said exactly that they're interested in something like what I have, I'm just going to build a relationship. When you're in the world of investing, of course, you're focused on an ROI. There's deals that have timelines. There is an aspect of that, but you're not gonna meet someone for the first time and get a $2, $3, $4 million, $5 million investment right away. You need to build a relationship with them. You need to understand them, and they need to understand you. And so I'm not meeting people and saying, oh, by the way, I have this deal you could get into. I'm saying, hey, I might have some opportunities. When are you available next week? Let's just make sure it's a good fit. Let's find alignment, and let's determine if this is a good fit to work together. It's very relationship based. And a lot of things in life are that way.
I mean, is there any specific filter questions you ask to know, okay, they're a good fit, they're not a good fit? So that, okay, you have to follow with them, or, these are not worth following up?
Well, for me, I'm looking for investors. So if they're not deploying capital, they're certainly not a good fit. They might be an operator, which I'll entertain. Does it make sense to get them into the right networks? Does it make sense to potentially raise for them. I'll look at those things. But if someone's a good fit or not when you meet them at an event is going to depend on guess and your intention, right? You have to know why you're going. Why I'm going, the questions that I ask could be totally irrelevant to your business model. As someone who's buying businesses or raising money for businesses or whatever the case may be. But yeah, I would say, you have to determine what's important to you. For me, it's finding investors. And so at these events, if someone's not deploying capital, they're probably not going to be a great fit right away. But again, for someone who's an industry leader, for someone who's doing deals, who's hungry, who has activity, I still build relationships. I'm not just like, okay, if you don't have money, get out of the way. There's relationships to be built across multiple different points, for education, for marketing efforts, for collaborations. There's more to the investment space than just writing checks.
Got it. Let's say you're having conversation with them and they're just talking. Like, what's your exit strategy? Like, how do you cut them off and, without like pissing them off at the same time? How do you go from one person to another?
Yeah, I don't tell a lot of people this. But I typically will exit conversations by saying, it's great getting to know you. I loved hearing about XYZ, what you shared. What is the best way to stay in touch with you? And then I'll collect a card. I'll collect a phone number or email, and I'll say, so great to meet you. I'll chat with you soon. And then I follow up later. But when you say, what's the best way to stay in touch with you? It's a subconscious signal that, I want to stay in touch. I'm ready to move on. Like, this conversation is going towards the end, etc.
Awesome. So how many people do you kind of try to target per event? Like, I have to meet at least these many people.
I mean, for me, it can be very exhausting after 30, 40, 50 people a day. I mean, you are going to be tired. I mean, for me, I wouldn't say everyone speak for themselves, but for me, after I've shaken around 40, 50 hands, I start to need, like, my social battery starts to die for sure.
So you made a post, that said, let me just read it. It was on, I think, on YouTube, community post, one of those. It said, everybody talks about networking like it's the golden ticket to success. But the truth is, connections don't convert if there is no system behind them. You can meet all the right people, but if you're not following up, building the relationship, or showing up with value, it's just a wasted conversation with a business card attached. I have closed deals and raised capital because I didn't let momentum die in the DMs. I followed up with clarity, built trust over time, and stayed consistent. Your network is only as strong as your ability to nurture it. That's like a one hell of a post. Like, it's like a masterclass in itself, when it comes to using events to kind of raise capital, right? So most people understand follow-up because, that's been the same thing and that's been like pushed out with marketing for probably decades now. Money's in the follow-up and, got to follow up X amount of times and things like that. So pretty much most people would have done the follow-up, but ended up in two buckets. So one is they did a lot of follow-ups and ended up pissing off the other person, or the other person started ghosting them, right? That's one the category. And the second one would be they just kept adding so much value for a long period of time, but they got nothing in return. So what is the right way to do a follow-up after you come from the event?
The best thing that you can do to follow up with someone after the event is talk about what you discussed in person. I think where a lot of people go wrong with follow-ups is it's like an automated blanket message. And that can work. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. That's better than nothing for sure, because you need to follow up. But if you can tie it back to something that you discussed in person, something you saw them visibly get excited about. Remember, one of my questions is, what are you excited about right now? What projects do you have coming up? You can tie it back to that. I tend to solicit like a strong response. People want to be heard, and to follow up and showcase quite literally with your actions that you were listening is very, very impressive. It's very strong. You're definitely going to address them by name. If you can bring it back to something that you discussed inside of the event in person, that's great.
I think also adding like the photo you have taken could, kind of like increase the response rate as well.
Yeah, of course, if you have that. The second thing, if you're proposing a meeting, one thing that I always try to do when proposing a meeting is here's the purpose of the meeting. Here's why I think it'd be beneficial to meet. And after that, I tend to give them a binary choice, like, does Tuesday or Wednesday work better for you? Not let me know if you're open to chatting. I don't do anything like, I try not to do anything like that. If I really want the meeting, then I'll tend to give like a binary choice of, does this week or next week work? Or what works better for you? Do you prefer mornings or evenings? Something like that to make it easy for them. We do a lot of thinking. And so the less thinking that I can get someone to do to engage with me, the better. Right. But there's no exact template. Like I mentioned, the best thing that you can do in your follow ups is be very granular and specific. But there is like a framework.
So in terms of, you talk about like value add, right? Okay, add value, with whenever you're following up. I mean, there is different people talk about different things. When it comes to value, some people are like, oh, just get the industry PDFs and stuff. In terms of like, let's say a deal, you send deals, or it's like you talk about what's happening in the industry and you kind of like share with them. Like I think like value is a so broad topic,
It is.
and it changes from person to person. Like
For
that's
sure.
my beliefs. What people do is they just have one standard, like it could be a PDF or it could be something, and they just start like blasting it to everyone, and then they're like, oh, I've been following up with this person for so long, adding value for so long, but there's nothing in written. So when you talk about value add, like how are you going about like kind of like adding value to this?
I think, adding value is such a broad topic because it's going to differ person by person. I think that's the tough part about adding value. You have to do enough discovery. For example, if I wrote a book about how to raise money or how to lend, for someone who's not lending, that's not going to be a value add. But for someone who's ready to learn, that's going to be a huge value add. I think when we say value add and adding value, it's so general. It can be construed as so general because it's so specific. You have to be willing to listen. You have to be willing to ask questions and ask the right questions to determine what is valuable for this person, what is valuable for this relationship. And there's so many matrices, there's so many workflows, there's so many different areas and avenues that you could go down trying to add value to people. But at the end of the day, you can add value to people if you are a good listener, you ask the right questions, you start to understand what problems are people facing, what do people want, right? People are motivated by two things, pain or pleasure. What is causing them problems and what problems can I solve for them? Or what are they trying to accomplish and why can't they get there? And what can I do to help them get there? Those are the two ways that you can add value very easily. But what it is that's going to be these two levers, you have to do your due diligence on that individual and find that out for yourself.
Yeah, I think that is the leverage, right? Like knowing, and also the hardest part, knowing what they want, like what's the problem they are facing. You can't just go and ask them, oh, what's your problem?
Yeah,
So
I mean, that doesn't work.
yeah, exactly. Also, like, I would love to go through the pitch deck, how you do it. Is it possible to, share like some of the presentation decks, you might have done, so we could kind of, hook it up with the podcast?
I mean, I could maybe share what a deck could look like, but a lot of the deals that I do have, the confidential information. It's a real deal, but I could share, the typical framework of what things.
Yeah, sure.
If someone's looking to raise money, your investor is going to go through 3 checkpoints in their head that your deck needs to cover. The first one is that they need to be secure on the industry that you are in. So you're not going to pitch a real estate deal to a crypto investor. You're not going to pitch crypto to a real estate investor. They're not sold on the industry. No matter how good your opportunity is, if your investor is not sold on the industry that it's in, you're done. Like, they don't care. It's not about you. It's not about your deal. They don't understand the marketplace that you're operating in. So that's a big problem. So that's the first thing that your deck should cover is like, why is this important? Why is this a good industry? Why does this industry work? For example, I don't invest right now in anything that has to do with retail. I don't do like consumer products. If someone's going to pitch me a consumer product deal, I need a lot of data on why this is better than real estate or why this is better than private credit. I'm not just going to jump in because they have the best consumer products since sliced bread. I need to understand the industry. The second thing that an investor is going to look at, subconsciously checkpoint in their head, is the strategy within the industry. So for real estate, for example, there's multiple strategies within real estate. People fix and flip, people develop, people lend, people buy and hold. There's all these different strategies within real estate. Once they understand the industry, they need to understand your strategy, why it matters, why it's nuanced, the supply and demand of it. Those things are the strategy. How is what you're doing different than what has been done? How is what you're doing unique or nuanced? What's your edge? What is your strategy within the industry? Why does your product or service matter? And why is now the best time? That's the second checkpoint that your deck needs to absolutely cover. The third thing, this is the last checkpoint typically before an investor is going to consider putting money in your deal, is the team. Who is the team that's going to execute on the strategy? Do they have experience? Do they have any skin in the game? Do they have any expertise? Have they done this before? Your team, this is where you pump up all the biographies. This is where you pump up all the credibility, the years of experience. You can showcase your team is the best team, the most equipped team to execute on the strategy. So I would say a good deck covers these three things. The industry is a good industry. Here's why. Here's why this industry is growing, why it's important. The second thing is here's our strategy within the industry. Here's our edge. Here's our competitive greatness. Here's why we're different. And then third, here's actually the people who are involved in this project. And here's why these people are the most equipped to execute on this project. And then of course you go through the typical boring stuff that I see people put first, which is like the returns and how much capital is needed or whatever the case may be. But that's the typical like structure that I would say accomplishes the goal of getting investors interested in your opportunity.
Now that you know that how to raise capital by being in the right room, but the truth is, right room isn't always in person. That's where Natumaya has come in. He has raised over $260 million doing it completely online through LinkedIn. Watch our next interview where he breaks down his exact strategies on how he raised capital from complete strangers, all done online.